So these are hard things to even talk about, aren't they? Like you just wish none of this would happen, that everything would just run smoothly. There's enough problems, let alone having conflict with people, especially if that conflict's in your team. That can just sap a lot of energy out of you. But if you let it continue, it will just keep draining more and more energy and life and joy. So we need to be able to deal with these things.
Yeah, you're right, John, that some people assume, and I'm one of them, that if I can just wait, things will get better.
Hmm.
And some things do. You don't want to make a major confrontation out of everything. But I've also noted that sometimes by letting things fester, they actually don't get any better. And
Yeah.
so we need to know that there are times when we do need to engage on something.
Yeah. So let's look at ways to do that, to deal with conflict. And so here are some common resolution styles. And the first one Dan just referred to, maybe the most common one, and it's called avoiding. Sometimes we just don't want to deal with the problem. So we avoid the issue and maybe we even avoid the person. And although that's not always best, sometimes it is the right approach. Sometimes letting things blow over works.
Yeah.
Like you said, Dan, you don't want to make a big deal out of everything. And so sometimes you diffuse it by just not giving it fuel. And that's what avoiding tends to do, especially with difficult personalities who are always looking for a fight. Just don't give them fuel.
Yeah. In fact, there's a proverb that says, uh, don't grab the ears of a dog as you're going by, something like that. I should be able to quote it better, but I'm just remember that came into my ear. If
That's
you
a good
grab a
one.
dog's ears, you're going to get bit. Like,
Yeah,
don't do that all the time.
yeah, that's right. That's a good metaphor for this for sure. Probably most of the time, avoiding conflict isn't the best, and lots of times it's not even possible. If the person that you're having the issue with just won't let it go, even if it's affecting your relationship with that person, they just keep digging in. Then you can recognize that okay, winning's the focus here, and it's become a competition. So competing is actually how some people handle the conflict. They put on their armor and they're ready to compete and take it on. And
Yeah, they
that's
just start at level 3.
yeah, that's where they start sometimes. You're right. And and so some people just handle conflict that way. Everything becomes a competition. On the other side of that, if the person believes that the relationship must be preserved at all costs, then the person wins by being passive and accommodating. But then what's happening with the issue? It's not resolved. It'll probably come up again. But for some people, this is how they handle most conflict. They just be passive and accommodate and let things go. And of course, until the issue arises again. For some people, their way of managing conflict is somewhere in the middle where they find a compromise. They find the middle ground to settle on. And sometimes, that is the easiest, the simplest, and most efficient solution. Let's just find a compromise here. Let's find the middle ground. And we both will have to give a little bit. But if we find that middle ground, if we find a compromise, can we both live with that? Usually, the best way to resolve an issue and still maintain relationships is a little deeper than that, and it's collaboration. So you see the difference there. Compromise is it's you're kind of giving in to the other person just to keep peace. Whereas collaboration is you're both invested, you're both committed to this, and you say, let's work together. Both people equally invested and working together towards achieving common resolution. That is usually best.
What's deeper about it is that in competing or in compromise, it's like my way or your way, and we have to kind of give up. In collaboration, you both come and say, is there actually a third way? And if you think hard enough, you can come up with another one that doesn't mean either of you lose. It means we find another way. That's collaboration when you work together to find that third option, third way. Yeah. Now, when it comes to conflict, Jesus actually gave a very clear teaching on this, because most of his teaching was in general terms. But when it came to conflict, it's the one teaching where he gave steps, because he knows this is the one we struggle with the most. And those steps are actually given to us in Matthew chapter 18. And I'd like to just talk about those, because if we would learn how to do these steps well, we can actually prevent, I would say, 80 to 90% of all conflict. So it makes sense to really work on these Matthew 18 principles. And Ken Sande, in his book Peacemaker, is written a whole book about this, about how to always make things work this way. I think Ken Houck is a companion volume, because you know what, some things don't turn out well.
Yeah, that's good.
Let's look at this. Step one is where Jesus says you go to the person one-on-one and you have a conversation with them. You do it privately, just one-on-one. And the point here is to come to clarification, make sure you understand things right, ask those open-ended questions, ask them what they, with their perspective on things, and look for reconciliation and look for a win-win in these things. But Jesus is a realist. And he says, sometimes it just actually won't work even at that level. So then the next step, he says, is you bring one or two with you and you go and approach the person again. Now, this increases accountability because other people are now involved. This stops things from being getting off rails as far as objectivity, because these people are bringing in this accountability of saying, well, what actually is going on here? And it's still the hope that there will be a resolution, there'll be a win-win, this can be resolved. But Jesus says sometimes even that doesn't work. So then you got to go to the next level. And then you have to actually let the leaders of the church know, the leaders of the organization. Now, here's when you start getting into official leadership structures have to begin to get involved. And at this point, they look for mediation as one way to start. And then if that doesn't work, then it bumps up another level to what we call arbitration, where the legal body or the board decides this is what it is. And then there's closure. Like that's the end of it. You're done. After that, if a person does not conform with that, then Jesus said, well, then let them be outside the church. Well, that is a very realistic understanding of that. You have different levels of conflict, different ways of dealing with it. Really practical stuff, John.
Yeah.
It works. It works if you'll just learn how to do it and train your leaders to follow along with these principles.
And Dan, the first one of go to the person sounds pretty elementary, and yet I know some managers, leaders who jump to step 3 first. They want to involve the organization and the rules and the regulations, and they broke the rule or try to prove that this person's wrong and try to prove their innocence before they even go to the person. And that's just not a great way to build healthy relationships.
No. But here again, it's likely because they've never been trained to know how do you go to a person when you got a difficult thing to talk about.
Yeah.
So we're giving you some tools here. And here's one. If you have to go and confront somebody, how do you do it? This is in Scott's book. How do you confront in 60 seconds? And it looks like this. You You go to the person and you have prepared yourself so that you don't go on and on. It's got to be short. You name the issue. You select a specific example that illustrates the problem that you're dealing with. You describe how you feel about this. You clarify what's at stake. And you humbly admit your contribution to whatever the problem might be.
Right.
You indicate your wish that you want to resolve this issue. And then you ask them, would you be willing to, can you respond? And can we start a conversation about this? Do that within 60 seconds. Boom.
Yeah.
Like, don't go on and on. If you go on and on, it gets, the emotions just rise even further. So just start this conversation with that tool right there, 60 seconds to confront.
Yeah. And it's good too. And it works. You really need to practice that, experiment with it. And you think, man, how can I say all that in 60 seconds? Because I got to bring my defenses and all this stuff. No,
No.
no, you don't. You can do this in 60 seconds and the person will be very clear on what they're talking about.
Yeah. And the key is under a minute. Because the longer you explain it, the worse it gets.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I first read this
experience,
Scott's book, I thought that is brilliant, and I have used that. I've been realized, okay, man, let's not make a big deal out of it. Let's just deal with it, and then say, let's talk.
Yeah. And then there's one when you are confronted.
Yes.
Take a 60 seconds as well.
When someone begins it with you, don't freak out.
Yeah.
Like, just hold yourself, and don't succumb to the temptation to kill the messenger. Right. Separate the message from the person there. Get a hold of your emotions. And if you don't know what to say, just be quiet. Let silence be kind of a neutral zone for you. Just say, well, let me think for a minute. And ask permission for time to respond, maybe be controlled. And if you're finding that you just really don't know what to say right now, you can say, well, could I get back to you on that? You brought up something really important here, and could I get back to you tomorrow or whatever you decide? State your intention that you want to resolve the issue, and that you do want to get together and work with them on this.
And the key is the 60-second pause, because typically what we do is we respond right away defensively, and if we can take that minute and just pause, breathe, think, and let silence do its work right then, because the person who just blurted it out also needs to think about what they just said.
Yep.
And so if you allow that, then maybe both of you can calm down, and it won't be as bad as what it first seemed like.
Yeah. And what I found helpful is that once they've made their dump, I say, well, I need to kind of catch this clearly. Do you mind if I just kind of, I'm going to take a piece of paper and just write down exactly what you're saying so I get it right? And then I say, let me say it back to you to make sure I'm hearing you right. Because when emotions get into the whole thing, you don't even hear it right.
Yeah.
And then when I say it back accurately, what happens is they will sometimes restate it, take some of the emotion and extreme out of it.
Yeah.
And they'll calm down a bit. And they'll say, it's this, and say, oh, okay, let's just get clear. It's this you're talking about.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Because people will, well, no, I didn't really mean that. Like, well, that's what you said. Well, I didn't really mean it. So.
Yeah. Well, and then don't try and argue. You did say that. Yeah. No, just let them change. Let them retract it and say, okay, then what did you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you get some. You're bringing the conflict down. Just pause.
Yeah.
And just let the emotion come down.
Yeah, that's good. The truth is, most of us are in the people business, and so understanding these concepts and mastering these skills could be very significant in reaching your goal of flourishing in your second half. It really can. You're gonna have to deal with people, and if you deal with people well, then this journey will go well. Pay attention to the escalation of conflict. Know what's happening and know what you need to do about it. and how you're going to approach it. Practice some of the skills and processes we've talked about. Experiment with your family if you can do that, um, and just get better at that. If you get better at these things, you'll be getting better at leadership. It may change your thinking about communication and conflict and the potential of really good conversations. So that pretty much wraps up course number 4. The next video is the last one for this course, and it is your course 4 synthesis. So the next video will explain some of that again. You've been through it a few times already, but we'll just spend some time explaining that again and looking forward to course number 5.